And their friend Stay Paulides, CanAm Missing Project, a copyrighted edition for a video channel. And you are watching Huck TV. Yes, she is the boss. She is the princess. She is asleep. Yeah. No, Huck is wide awake, giving me the side eye, up eye right now, saying, Dad, what are you doing? But she's been a good puppy. She's keeping me company. And I'm blessed to have her. And in fact, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about canines and dogs, because I think we could all learn something from dogs. Patience, bravery. Yeah. So many of you don't know that I have a Twitter page. Post on there 4 or 5 times a day. Current events. And a recent one I posted was in Houston. They have a violent offender task force down there where it's U.S. Marshals, deputies, police officers. They all form a team and they work together for 6 months to a year. And they target the worst of the worst. And a deputy named Jesse Vargas was shot and killed there the other day. Brave man. Really a brave man. And they were pursuing the suspect, and one of the U.S. Marshals had a canine, and the canine trapped the suspect in a dumpster, and the guy jumps out, shoots the dog twice, the canine, and the Marshals killed the suspect in a shootout. And on my Twitter, I posted them calling for air evac for Rocky the dog. And let me tell you, folks, flat out, because I've worked around those canine teams for years. Those dogs will put themselves in harm's way for the love of you. And I can't tell you how many law enforcement officers' lives have been saved because of dogs, canines. And they're officers too. That's what everyone says. They're officers. They're U.S. Marshals. So the video that I posted shows the Marshals carrying the dog to the this piece of grass where they called in the helicopter. And they got Rocky to an emergency vet. And he was shot in the neck, and he was shot in the nose. And I posted just today, or the other day, that he's going to survive. Deputy Vargas died. Rocky will survive. And I don't know. That bothered me. It bothers me every time I hear about a police officer dying, but dogs are so innocent. And they will do so many things for the love of you. And if you've never had a dog, it's just really hard to explain. I mean, Huck does things around me that I can't believe sometimes. And the other day, I'm sitting on the couch, and I got my hand kind of on the pad where my leg is, and Huck comes over and puts her head right on top of my hand. Like, don't move. Stay right there. I thought, wow, that was pretty cool. And right now, it's just Huck and I at the house. So it can get pretty lonely. And she's really stepped up. Good dog. Really good dog. And some people made a comment on a post the other day. Hey Dave, the body mass index on your dog is a little large. You better stop feeding it if you want it to live. I could have punched the person that said that, because just about 2 weeks ago, I was down at our local pet food store, and it's a little place, privately owned, and they have these doggy baths. So you can bring your dog and shower him off, and the owner, I'm getting to know him, he comes by and goes, "Wow, Huck's pretty thin." Yeah, because when you look at Huck now, she's got 2 layers of fur, and she's in full winter attire. That's why she looks so big. But when you get her wet, she's just a little thing. And so before you make derogatory comments, know the breed. Anyhow, we're going to talk about today a missing hunter. And not your normal missing hunter. This one is very bizarre. And the case is out of Maine. Now, not too long ago, I was telling you about a case out of New Brunswick, and we talked about Edmundston. Well, here's the Canadian border. This is New Brunswick over here. This is Maine. The family lived in Caribou, and they had a hunting camp right here, not too far. And Baxter State Park, I've written about in my books that children have disappeared here under super unusual circumstances, and this is Bangor down here. So you kind of get a feeling. This is the far eastern side of Maine, Canada. This out here is in the middle of nowhere. All right? Yeah, good girl. So Robert Smith was this man's name. He was 70 years old. He went missing November 18th, 1997 at about 2:30 in the afternoon. This was Robert. And this is exactly what he was wearing when he disappeared. He was wearing an orange hunting vest and an orange cap, really bright orange. And he was dressed warm, just like a hunter should be in Maine. Now, Robert and his wife lived in Caribou, a 20-minute drive from his hunting camp. Both were retired farmers. And this thing keeps moving on me. There we go. Wake you guys up a little bit. So, they're both retired farmers. Love to hunt deer, and they had a hunting camp for decades. Robert and his wife knew this camp like you know your backyard. Okay, so get the feeling of it. Now, Robert got the okay from his doctor to go hunting because he had just recently come back from cancer surgery. The doctor probably thought it'd be good for him to get out there. But he also had a disability. Robert was deaf in one ear, very little hearing in the other ear. Remember I told you about these things. So his hunting camp was in the southeast part of Garfield Plantation, a very small community in Maine. He was described as an extremely experienced hunter, knew his way around firearms, carried a .30-06. And on November 18th, they had planned this day for a long time because they had his wife's 3 brothers coming in to go into the area with them as well. So in total, they had 5 people. So they get there. Robert puts on his bright orange cap, and I'm telling you, you can't miss these things for miles. And he puts his wife in a deer stand in a perfect location to get a shot. And he tells his wife that he's going to go out and kind of push the deer towards her. You've heard this before. In Missing 411, The Hunted, a man was sitting in a position while the youngsters were pushing the deer towards him. He disappeared, was never found. And remember I talked about another hunter in Maine in the same position where he was in a seated position and he's found later in a body of water. Now in this case, Mrs. Smith is sitting in the seat. It's 2:30 in the afternoon. Robert says, hey, I'm going to go push it. I'll be pushing them for about 90 minutes, and I'll see you at about 4 o'clock. She says, okay. So Robert walks off. His wife sees him walking in the direction where she expects him to be going. She doesn't see any deer. She doesn't hear anything. 4 o'clock rolls by. 4:30 rolls by. Now she's starting to get nervous. She comes down out of the stand, and she starts looking for Robert. And she starts to round up some of her brothers to also search. They search for 90 minutes. They call his name. They fire off rounds. Nothing. And they knew Robert had 5 rounds, but they hadn't heard anyone taking a shot. At 5:30 that afternoon, they decide that they're going to call the Maine State Police and the Maine Warden Service. Now, there's a show on TV about the Maine Warden Service. It's actually a really good show. I watch it every once in a while. And they actually go out and search for missing people. That was the bizarre part. And this one show that I watched, there were white orbs seen. They said that there were strange white lights seen in the mountain where this person disappeared. And yeah, I'm thinking, yeah, I know what those are. But anyhow, getting back to the story. This hunting area, this hunting camp, had a couple beaver ponds, beaver dams, small ponds, and a couple of meadows. Wasn't that big. But at 5:30, the wardens start arriving, and it's dark, and they're calling for Robert. They fire off a few rounds, nothing. But they stayed on site, and they used flashlights, and they searched until 11:30 at night. Now, here's the weird thing. At 11 o'clock at night, everybody's on scene, and they hear one gunshot. They never said how far away they thought it was, but they thought, that's really odd. First of all, nobody can be hunting at night. And why just one? Well, the next day, November 19th, well, first of all, that night, one of the wardens starts getting approval to call in for a full search and rescue the next day. He gets it. And the next day, all regional wardens were dispatched to this hunting camp to search. And they also got 2 specialty canine units dispatched as well. Temps at night were in the low 20s. They weren't too concerned about that because Robert was dressed pretty warm. And his wife explained that she didn't believe Robert could be lost. Knew the area too well, had been around too many times. That wasn't really a possibility. Well, at the end of the day on the 19th, the wardens made a request to Canada, because remember I showed you on that map how close Canada was, for Canada to dispatch search and rescue teams as well. This part of Maine was not a really highly populated area, so they were pulling people from 100, 200 miles away to help search. It's a long way to go home at night. Well, next day, November 20th, 150 searchers are on scene, along with the Maine governor had been contacted by the commissioner from the Warden Service and said, I think we need the National Guard on this one. It's not looking good. So they dispatched 50 National Guard soldiers, a National Guard helicopter, and a full crew. Search and rescue dogs stayed on site. The declaration by the governor, which is what it took, an emergency declaration for that area, was a big deal. So on the 21st, they had 50 National Guard members. They had 200 searchers in total, 200 on the ground pounding in grid, and part of them, their whole job was to drain all the ponds in that area to ensure that Robert wasn't there. Now they had trackers there. They were looking for prints. Canines weren't picking up a scent. Things were looking real gloomy. Again, on the 21st, a lieutenant from the Maine Warden Service stated that at this point they could use 1,000 searchers because they had nothing. And they weren't sure how far out they were going to have to push the search. Now, they had snow forecasted coming in the next couple days, and that meant that all air ops would have to stop, which isn't good. November 22nd, the Maine warden in charge gave a press conference, and stated that they had searched 17,000 acres. They had used 2 canines, National Guard members, and a helicopter, and they were grid searching every facet of the hunting camp and outwards. Snow was falling. November 23rd. The supervisory game warden was a lieutenant named Pat Dorian. He had 12 years of search and rescue experience, and he was calling the shots. Just watching the game warden show on TV and the amount of time they're out there searching, Maine's one of these places that has a lot of experience in search and rescue. Much more than many other locations in the U.S. that I see these people just plundering around and really not knowing what they're doing. These guys know what they're doing. Well, Dorian held a press conference and gave an update, and he made this statement. He stated, "This has us totally baffled." I've said this before. You don't hear search and rescue people making these kind of statements. It's very rare. At the request of the wardens, the governor kept the emergency declaration in place, and he kept the National Guard members on site. Very cold, living in tents, eating rations of food. It's not a fun existence for guys they're National Guard, so they have a full-time job. Not a lot of fun, but they're doing God's work right here. November 24th through the 25th. The lieutenant kept expanding the search because they weren't finding anything. And locals and neighbors kept coming in to assist en masse. Local newspapers gave this a lot of press. Almost every day there was something new in the paper. Many times it was that statement that they needed more searchers. So companies in the area closed and people came to hunt for Robert. November 26th, another press conference. They'd been searching for a week. They said they covered 18,000 acres. And the commissioner of the warden service was on site, a man named Lee Perry. He sat down with the family and he brought out a big map showing the grids, and he explained in detail how many men, how many resources have been deployed to look for Robert. Everyone was very frustrated at the lack of clues. And the only thing that they found was one boot print of Robert's, not very far from the stand that Mrs. Smith was on, headed in the right direction that she said he was going. But that was it. The commissioner explained that 96 search and rescue teams had grid searched a 6-mile circle from the point Mrs. Smith was in the stand. They stated there was 150,000 combined search hours with volunteers, neighbors, state police, National Guard, and then wardens themselves did 3,000 hours of searching. And they had canines on site for 4 days. That is a big effort, folks. Well, the family, in conjunction with the commissioner, they decide, I don't know what else you can do. There's no way he could still be alive. I say we suspend all search operations. And they did. They agreed to come back when it got warmer and the snow was no longer on the ground. So Memorial Day weekend was the choice. That would have been 1998. They called it a new search and rescue effort, and they brought cadaver dogs. They were looking for a body, there's no question, and they focused on a 2-mile radius from Mrs. Smith's hunting stand. And they did it for 2 days. There's no doubt that a canine can pick up a cadaver smell from 2 miles away. There's no doubt. Minute little particles. Cadaver dogs can actually pick up the smell of a body submerged in water because the body gives off minute little bubbles, and canines hit on that. You can put it, if you think somebody's in the water, you can actually put a canine on a boat. Just like, and I'm serious, just like Huck is right here, putting him on the bow of the boat, smelling for bubbles. Well, they searched for 2 days. At the end of it, there was a supervisory warden named Chuck Richard that spoke to reporters at the end of the effort. And this is what he said. He says, "This is quite baffling, really." He's frustrated. And I could sense it just by reading everything that was put out about this. Now, 1 year after Robert disappears, there's articles in the paper again talking about this incident, November 98. Wardens said they were more puzzled than ever that Robert hadn't been located. And why is that? Well, you went through one whole hunting season and half of another, where you get people in the woods walking around. You think they'd stumble onto something, but they don't. That same warden said something that I think is true. He says we almost always find our targets. And when we don't, we feel like we've not succeeded. That's the right kind of attitude. And then they explained that they were going to try a new strategy. They knew what Robert was carrying: rifle, 30-06, 5 rounds, orange vest, orange cap. And they put out his belt, wallet, everything that he'd be carrying. And they put these on posters all over this part of the state. Sporting goods stores, markets, every place someone would walk by and stop and maybe read it. And the strategy was that somebody walking through the woods, let's just say, sees an orange cap laying in the ground, half covered by leaves. Maybe that would ring in your head and you'd go over there and start digging around. Well, they did that. They did it for 2 years. Nothing happened. Ultimate frustration. Now, some of you may not quite understand profile points. This case is a 10x on profile points, and let me explain. First of all, Robert was sick. I stated that in the woods, it's like somebody gets sick. Well, Robert was sick. He was recovering from cancer surgery. He had cancer. But that wasn't it. He also had a disability. He was hearing impaired. He was deaf in one ear, could hardly hear out of the other. The area that they were in had water everywhere. Ponds, beaver dams. And like I said, they spent a good portion with those searchers emptying all of those ponds. So he wasn't in there. And he was in a subgroup of the missing hunters. And an important one. Robert helped his wife get into the stand. He tells her, I'm going to be gone for about 90 minutes. I'm going to walk around, push the deer towards you, and I'll come back. If you see something, shoot it. Point of separation. She saw him disappear into the woods right where he said he'd be going. Now, Robert was never found. He was surrounded by his family, his wife and her 3 brothers. What in the heck happened? Now, this area of northern Maine, actually a little, just not much west, but a little bit west of this, in Missing 411 Eastern U.S., I wrote a story about 2 game wardens. Yeah, 2 that disappeared. And they believed at the time that they were having poachers coming from Canada down into the U.S. and poaching game. So they sent these 2 wardens, seasoned, grizzled, tough. They said that they were the outdoorsmen of the entire state, out to go do surveillance and find out what was happening up there. They disappeared. Never found. It's one of the greatest mysteries in Maine. And I took a good portion of that book writing about this because it intrigued the heck out of me. So, and there was a lot of intrigue behind what they were really doing there. Because the insinuation that it was hunters coming out of Canada didn't make a lot of sense to me, but maybe they weren't releasing all the information. So that area of northern Maine, even today, there's hardly anybody up there. So friends, that's our story. Robert Smith, never found. Remember that Twitter account I was telling you about? It's called @CanAm Missing. Get on there, join it, follow me. You'll like it. It's a healthy atmosphere now there, and I talk about a lot of current events, and I talk about missing people every day. So I just got the Tribal Bigfoot and the Hoopa Project in, and they're on our website. And we're supposed to get more books in the next couple days. So hopefully I'll have everything in stock within a week. But check out our site. It's NA, like North America, nabigfootsearch.com. Go to the online store. Thank you for being here. Be kind, be patient. Smiles are free. And sometimes when Huck smiles at me, it makes me feel great. The Kindness Revolution. Paulides out.